Hello everyone, it's time for a magical fight analysis here on Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. But don't worry, because we're just as lost as you are. But hey, as I said, it's going to be a magical fight, and that's right, I am jumping into a story, a series that defined a generation, Harry Potter. J.K. Rowling, thank you so much for writing this amazing masterpiece. The Harry Potter series, in both book and film forms, has amazingly been the story that bridged nearly every walk of life on the globe and brought people from all over into the wondrous world of fantasy. I grew up with Harry Potter. From the formative years of 8 to 18, it was almost like he was a friend in book form to me. I had the first two books read to me when I was in grade school, and I finally got my hands on my first Harry Potter book, which was the third book, The Prisoner of Azkaban, and I just read that thing so many times that it fell apart, and I still have the pieces. I love it way too much for me to get a replacement. And then I grew up with Harry. I got to experience all of the pains and awkwardnesses and joys and euphoria of adolescence at around the same time that he was. And I'm very happy to say that I never got as angsty as he did in the fifth book, in the Order of the Phoenix. Man, that was a low point for Harry. And then I got to the seventh book right after I graduated from high school, and that was when Harry grew up to be an adult within the book series. And it really is just, when I think about Harry Potter, the series, it's been an amazing adventure. I can go back to any of the books, and I can once again feel where I was growing up when I read that particular book. I can once again walk down memory lane in such a unique way with a unique friend in book form, and I then also have great appreciation for it now as an adult. And this is just one of the reasons why I feel it's such a masterpiece. It did so much to, as I said, to bring people together from all over the world into the wondrous realms of fantasy, and yet it's such a personable story that even little old me can just get so immersed into it and find such great meaning and say, yeah, Harry, a fictional character, has been my friend. And throughout the years, I was and still am admittedly much more of a Lord of the Rings fan than I am maybe a Harry Potter fan. Almost way too deep. I could give Stephen Colbert a run for his money. Just because, I love the sheer scope and size of Middle-earth. I'm enthralled by the adventures. I get lost in the epicness. But at the same time, the heart of Harry Potter is just, that's something that I can always come back to. Now then, really, so why do I bring up this this personal little journey of mine? I guess I can say the thing is that for you watching this or listening to this video, to this fight analysis, this right here is kind of the dream that many writers have, that you can create something that, yeah, you want it to become so big that it makes you famous, makes you lots of money, that people everywhere get to know your characters, get to know your story. But the thing that is so amazing about writing is when someone can say what you wrote hit them on a personal level, and that they loved it, that it's something they've come to cherish, and that within time they can still look back at it fondly. And that's when you know that you've really written a masterpiece. Sure, it might not be perfect, no story is, but a masterpiece is something that sticks with people long after they're done reading it. And something that has stuck with me for so long has been the end fight between Harry and Voldemort. And it's particularly something I'm really glad that this fight was suggested to me by Camille, because for the longest time I kind of looked down on it. I thought it was a rather weak installment in the grand epic of Harry Potter. But when I approached the Harem, asking for suggestions as far as fight analyses go that I could do, she suggested that I do this fight, but with a little bit of a twist, that I compare the book's version of the fight to the films. And this is what she had to say about it. She said, I think it's important because while the fight in the movie looks cool and it shows off the effects that can be shown in movies, I personally think it's a little lackluster because in the book, while it may not be as cool, you get a better sense of triumph because Harry gets to defeat Voldemort in front of everyone. So it's not just Harry defeating him in a sense, but so many more people in whom Voldemort has caused suffering. So, ergo, in this video, I won't be just looking at the fight through the lens of the book or the movie, but I will be comparing the two of them. And I hope that through this I can convey some great writing insight as a result, but also show you how I've been able to realize just how important this fight is and that it's actually something that's really, truly amazing. That it's not just some lackluster bookend to a phenomenal series, but that it's extraordinarily important. So I will start with why this battle was really not what I was expecting. So let's be blunt, when I first read through it, I thought this is extremely anticlimactic. And even now I'm still like, okay, oh, that just happened. Voldemort is just dead. Poof, gone. Both in the book and in the movie. Or at least that's the way it comes across at the beginning. And as I delve deeper with my two fight questions, we will see the greater implications of this final duel. So remember, my two questions are, what kind of a story is this, and what is the purpose of this fight? Harry Potter is a series about an abused orphan whose life changes when he learns that he's a wizard, and goes to Hogwarts, School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. This is a tale about growing up, framed in the context of a magical war between good and evil. The series resonates with us because in the course of 7 books and 8 movies, we see Harry grow up in personal ways, like how I mentioned before, and even more. And, well, that's the story. So why this fight? Why is it so important other than, hey, the big bad gets knocked out at the end? Oops, spoilers. Well, you see, Voldemort walks the path to becoming not just the greatest dark wizard of all time, but the most powerful sorcerer the world will ever know. So, out of fear and the desire to prove his might, he seeks to overcome death by splitting his soul into 7 pieces via the creation of Horcruxes, devices which will store your soul through the act of murder. And so with each murder, each experiment, and each Horcrux Voldemort creates, he becomes even stronger. And he becomes almost invincible until he hears about a prophecy from Sybil Trelawney about one who will be born who could overthrow him. And in the classic tradition of Greek tragedy, Voldemort storms into Godric's Hollow and attempts to kill the infant Harry Potter. However, Lily Potter's great love and sacrifice placed a barrier between him and her son that rebounds the killing curse of Avada Kedavra right on Voldemort and slays him. And thus, Voldemort has created his ultimate downfall. And the great conflict between Lord Voldemort and the boy who lived begins. Well, so the Harry Potter series is a bit long, and in order to really give the background to this, I'm only going to be hitting a few of the big key moments, which starts with Lord Voldemort regaining his powers in his body in the Goblet of Fire via a resurrection potion that uses Harry's blood so that way Voldemort can have access to Lily's protective love. And as Dumbledore later explains to Harry about the prophecy and everything, he states that the Dark Lord does this so that way he can kill Harry more easily, or at least so he thinks. And Dumbledore, in the process of time, reveals the existence of the Horcruxes and charges Harry with finding them and destroying them, so that way he'll be able to kill Lord Voldemort. And spoilers! Dumbledore dies, which then leads us into the 7th book, where Dumbledore, through the beyond the grave, in his last will and testament, leaves clues to how Harry, Ron, and Hermione might be able to find the remaining Horcruxes and destroy them. And part of this trail of clues leads them to discover these instruments called the Deathly Hallows. 3 artifacts, the Elder Wand, the Resurrection Stone, and the Invisibility Cloak, that when combined will grant the wielder mastery over death. And so Harry is faced now with a very difficult choice. Should he hunt down the Hallows and unite them in order to defeat Voldemort as the true Master of Death, or should he sacrifice himself in hunting down the Horcruxes and destroying them one by one? Thanks to Hermione's stubbornness and Harry finally maturing with Dobby's death, more spoilers, he chooses to continue slaying the Horcruxes, and this leads to the Battle of Hogwarts, as Harry and Voldemort race to secure the Diadem of Ravenclaw. And it is here that Rowling gives us an absolutely brilliant magical fight and siege. The Battle of Hogwarts is one of the best examples of how a final fight can be written and be beautifully executed. In a lull during the siege, however, Harry learns from Snape's memories that he is an unintended Horcrux and that he must allow Voldemort to kill him. So using the Cloak of Invisibility and the Resurrection Stone, Harry makes his way to Voldemort in the Forbidden Forest and he accepts death, only to cheat it. Yeah, he dies, but he's given the choice to return and to finish Voldemort for good. When his body is paraded before Hogwarts and its defenders, Neville, the sleeper hero of the series, defies Voldemort, and for that, he has the Sorting Hat placed on his head, and he and the hat are set on fire. Harry then reveals himself that, hey, I'm not dead yet, and this gives Neville the opportunity to destroy the final Horcrux with the Sword of Gryffindor, and this is where the battle really begins, at least for Harry and Voldemort, and where the book and the movies diverge in terms of battle mechanics. You see, in the book, Harry and Voldemort's duel is incredibly simple. Once Neville kills Nagini, everything descends into chaos as the Centaurs, Gwarp, and the creatures of the Forbidden Forest attack the rear, and the parents of the students at Hogwarts and the citizens of Hogsmeade rush through the Room of Requirement and attack in the front, while the House Elves flank from the kitchens. And the Death Eaters are overwhelmed by numbers and just by the sudden assault that they break on down and they're pushed into the Grand Hall, where Voldemort duels Professor McGonagall and Slughorn alongside Kingsley, as Bellatrix duels Molly Weasley. And Harry is forced to cast a protection spell between Molly and Voldemort once Molly kills Bellatrix, because Voldemort's pissed. He's not happy at all that his best and his last lieutenant has just been murdered. And once he realizes that it's been Harry who cast the protection spell, Harry whips off the invisibility cloak, and he and Voldemort begin prowling around each other in a circle in the middle of the Grand Hall as everyone gathers. And here Harry begins to have a dialogue with Voldemort, trying to explain, you're going to lose no matter what. The only way that you're going to save yourself, Tom Riddle, is if you try for some remorse, which infuriates Voldemort. And huzzah, we have the final blast of spells of Harry's wand taken from Draco Malfoy versus the Elder Wand. And the Elder Wand decides that it's not going to play ball for Voldemort anymore, and the power of love once again kicks in, protects everyone, protects Harry. The Elder Wand betrays Voldemort and allows the Expelliarmus spell to cast the killing curse right back at Voldemort, and this time finally ending him. And as the sun rises on a brand new day, Voldemort lands mundanely on the ground, dead. However, in the movie, the fight takes a totally different form. Everything is much, much crazier and flashier, as Nagini is not hunted down at first by Neville, but by Ron and Hermione, as Voldemort fights Harry throughout the entire castle as he animates his clothes. They do transfiguration, they do apparition, disapparition, which kind of breaks the rules that you're not able to do that in Hogwarts, but any case. And there's even an odd form of occlumency where Voldemort tries to take over Harry at one point. it's pretty chaotic. And it ends up with them pointing their wands as hard as they can at each other. No explanation given whatsoever. And Neville comes on about, sees the sword of Gryffindor suddenly peeping out of the sorting hat, takes it, and kills Nagini. And with that, Voldemort, you begin to see it's like he's breaking down, as though he's now finally feeling the loss of his soul, and the power of the wand is shaken, and this gives Harry his opportunity to cast Expelliarmus and push the killing curse Voldemort's way, and it hits, and as a result, Voldemort goes poof, Infinity War style. For an important comparison here, the essence of this duel, the fights, the movie's version of this fight is much flashier, and it's pretty epic. It has kind of what when I was younger, what I wanted was like, yeah, I want Harry and Voldemort to really just duke it out because this is the final fight between good and evil. But when I look at what the movie has to offer up, though it's really cool and flashy, it lacks a certain amount of emotional weight and catharsis. And it also has a less meaningful end. You see, the epicness of Harry and Voldemort dueling throughout the castle is countered by the repetitive wand pointing at the end, and the lack of explanation as to what's actually going on. And a lot of world-building rules were broken in order to make this happen. As I said, the whole apparating and Hogwarts not supposedly being able to work, yeah, it's kind of awkward.
Draco. Draco.
And the whittling away of Voldemort's soul, while satisfying, it's not as fulfilling as what the book presents, because as you see in the movie, as opposed to in the book, it just seems as though Voldemort's getting weaker and weaker and more destabilized, which is kind of nice. But in the book, Voldemort's still at full power towards the very end. He is so detached from himself that he doesn't even feel that he's lost all the other pieces of his soul. And thus, we see that there's a certain kind of weight that's lost. As the movie presents it seems as though Voldemort is getting weaker and weaker, which makes him easier to kill. But in the book, you don't have quite that reassurance. And so it all comes down to Harry's faith in the Hallows and in the faith of love that allows him to face down Voldemort and triumph. And this is why I think that the book really gives us more to chew on. Which is kind of funny because the duel between Harry and Voldemort in the book is just really technically 2 spells long. Protego and then Avada Kedavra versus Expelliarmus. In order for the fight to have its full meaning and impact, it is built up with the Battle of Hogwarts in both the book and the movie, but we also get to see the struggle between Hallows and Horcruxes in the book. You see, Dumbledore did intend for Harry to win using the Hallows, but not in the way that Harry and the gang might have at first supposed. As seen with both Grindelwald and Voldemort, and maybe even Dumbledore to a certain extent, the journey to conquer death destroys the Seeker, but Harry proves himself the master of death in this final duel and in the events leading up to it, by using the invisibility cloak to help escape Hogwarts in order to find Voldemort to die, and using the resurrection stone to give him the strength to meet and accept death. And the Elder Wand turns on the Dark Lord, killing him. So you see all these Horcruxes, these 3 Hallows. So you see the 3 Hallows combined in a series of events made Harry the master of death and allowed him to defeat the would-be usurper of death, Voldemort and his Horcruxes. So what this final duel of mostly words then in the book is supposed to show us is that Harry has kept his soul intact by not seeking to be the master of death, but instead seeking to protect those he loves by accepting death and putting down Voldemort. The Hallows lent Harry their strength in the end to triumph. The victory is monumental in a spiritual and mental way, though kind of mundane in a physical sense. So what this final duel of mostly words is supposed to show us is that Harry has kept his soul intact by not seeking to be the master of death, but instead seeking to protect those he loves by accepting death and defeating Voldemort and his Horcruxes. The Hallows lent Harry their strength in the end so that he could triumph. This victory is monumental in a very spiritual and mental way, and not so much in a physical sense. And that's one of the reasons why it really sticks on out. Why it's really neat. Because it shows that a fight doesn't have to be all about the physical conflict like what we get in the movie, which is really neat, but in the end not quite as cathartic and fulfilling as it is with the book, where we see that this whole quest of the 7th book, Hallows versus Horcruxes, comes to a head and Harry is made master of death because he accepted it rather than seeking to conquer it. And that is the essence of him as a hero, his self-sacrifice. And as far as the consequences of the fight goes, the aftermath, it's really fast in both book and movies. Peace has come about, Voldemort's been defeated, Death Eaters get rounded up, and we get a massive time skip to Harry and friends, now married, having kids, and their kids going off to Hogwarts. So we don't really get to see what this particular duel has in the long run in terms of effects, but we just know that the world is a better place because Voldemort's now gone. And that's basically it. Alright, so let's get on to some writing advice, because this is what you came here for. How can this final duel help you when it comes to writing your own action scenes? Well, to be honest, this is one final battle that is really kind of hard to use as an example because of how unique it is. The Battle of Hogwarts is, however, a really great battle that you can really break down and see all the different kinds of mechanics that have been used, and it's absolutely fantastic the way it's built up, goes into a lull, is built up, goes into a lull, and builds up once more for that final good punch. So the Battle of Hogwarts is pretty intense, it's pretty awesome. But this final duel between Harry and Voldemort is a rather interesting one, because it's filled with just lengthy dialogue between the hero and villain, as Harry explains why Voldemort is about to lose. You see, the reason why it works, this normally wouldn't work at all. As we know from The Incredibles, monologuing just kind of leads to a silly end. What J.K. Rowling did, what she did an excellent job with, was building up the hype through this excellent preceding battle, the Battle of Hogwarts. How all the events push Harry and Voldemort together, and so there's this massive amount of hype for them fighting each other, and then she keeps tension throughout the entire time that they're talking, as Harry and Voldemort watch one another, and as Harry's able to mark the tells that Voldemort is getting ready to cast Avada Kedavra. And so it's really neat because you get this duel at high noon feel combined with a conversation at the poker table, with guns cocked and ready to fire underneath said table. So you can have your characters talk as they fight, but remember again the kind of story that you're telling. If you are telling an anime, a manga, a superhero, or a cartoonish fight, characters can blab all they want as they're fighting without getting winded. However, if you're trying to write something a little more realistic, your character will probably not be in a talkative mood. And if they are, and if there's a lot of action happening, then there will be a lot of shouting, a lot of gasping for air, and people might not understand one another entirely. They might only catch snippets of what's actually being said, so they'll probably mishear one another as well. There's a lot to consider when it comes to having dialogue in your fights and in your action moments. My best advice is to workshop it out and really think about what is being said and if it fits the situation. Even better yet, go outside and reenact some of this action stuff for yourself. If screaming, "You can't take my donuts from me!" sounds really weird while you're driving 100 miles an hour through a kid-friendly playground, then it probably is going to sound stupid when you write it out. And you probably shouldn't be driving 100 miles an hour through a playground. In any case, again, do not sacrifice the flow of your fight for some convenient dialogue. What makes the conversation between Harry and Voldemort work is that there is a pause in the battle, which allows them to talk. But they are still gearing up to murder one another. The tension is never lost. And though the action has died down, it is maintained through their posturing, through the way that the atmosphere of the room is described, how clipped their sentences are. That's all really important. Another thing to consider is what the emotional weight and stakes are that make a fight have its lasting impression. Awesome tricks, neat battle stances, cool tactics, and even a Michael Bay explosion or two are nice when the action has real depth to it. Because the movie omits Harry's explanation to Voldemort about the awesome link to Hallows versus Horcruxes and everything like that, the spiritual and mental weight that the books built up is lost. So though the movie's end battle is much more exciting, it is less filling in the long run. So flashy battles and fights are a ton of fun to write, and they should not be discounted for what they can bring to the table, but without deeper context and meaning for the story and the characters, they are the literary equivalent of cotton candy. Expressing that narrative depth can take the form of dialogue or monologues during a fight if they're well thought on out, and if the moment for that dialogue is very well set up before, and that there's then a good resolution after the fight. Coming back to the whole battle, like fight at high noon or talking at the poker table, really think about it. When it comes to like old spaghetti westerns and stuff like that, you would have your duels in front of the town or in the middle of the town, and there's not a whole lot of talking. It's the time for action. Where you get a lot of the talking would happen in these stories at the poker table, where the characters reveal their reasonings for what it is that they're doing. They reveal their plans, or "you didn't see me coming, bucko." Stuff like that. And if you wanted to really then spice up that monologue scene or that dialogue scene, as I said, you would have it where they're all at the table and they would have their guns cocked and ready, but they're underneath the table, all pointed at one another. And so that would be an amazing instance where you could have fantastic tension as these characters are talking, because they don't know when they might get shot. So they have to make what they say count and drive home meaning without inciting a bullet to the guts. Once again, things to think about with dialogue. If you're going to put dialogue into a fight, it should continuously be tense, and not just something like we're fighting, pause, break, time out, let me talk about something, blah 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 blah. Okay, time out, done. Let's get back to the action. You see, that's what you don't want to have happen if you're going to have your characters talk in the middle of a fight. And so that's basically my advice there. As I said, this fight is pretty simple, but the differences in how the movie and the book approach this final duel really has a massive difference. And if you don't believe me, then go back and reread The Deathly Hallows and then rewatch the movies. They're both pretty awesome, but I think you'll see what I mean. And that's really all I have to say about this comparison between the book and the movie versions of Harry's and Voldemort's final duel. And I think in the future I might return to actually break down in full the Battle of Hogwarts, because that is, as I said, a pretty fascinating battle, and I would love to do an analysis of it at some point in time. But in the meantime, we have a bunch of episodes on our podcast, Camille's Harem, that you should go check out if you haven't done it already. You can find them on Podbean, Google Play, and iTunes. We also have some fun stuff on our Tumblr for you to check out, as well as some amazing writing advice and exercises from Camille on our Pinterest, and some pretty great discussions on our Reddit that you can use to engage us in conversations about whatever when it comes to writing, and also reach out to some other young writers out there. Links for all of these sites are going to be in the description box below, and if you want to be notified of next week's fight analysis, which will be a comparison of Captain America versus Bucky against Keith versus Shiro from Voltron Legendary Defender. If you want to be notified of when that goes up, then please subscribe and hit the bell icon. And finally, as always, we are on the hunt for terrible fan fictions that we can do epic readings of. So if you have a suggestion, please send it to us via our Twitter at Camille's Harem. And until next time, tschüss.